My name is Eleanor Ingersoll. I am president of the Queen Village Neighbors Association, and tonight is our monthly community meeting where we focus on topics important to the community. Tonight's topic, understanding zoning, ByRight Projects, and the civic design review process. There are currently 5 major construction projects begun or headed to Queen Village. 4 of these are ByRight. It's important to understand the zoning process and hear from the different departments that weigh in on the progression of such projects. Tonight, we have joining us Rich Montanez, Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Streets. He is here to answer questions about the role of the Streets Department in ByRight zoning licenses. We also have Ian Litwin, Central District Planner with the city's Department of Planning and Development, often referred to as the Planning Commission. He is here to answer questions about ByRight projects, civic design reviews, and the role of the community. We are also joined by Councilman Mark Squilla, here to answer questions regarding council's role in the zoning process, especially for ByRight projects. Before we get to the discussion, we'll play a short video for you prepared by the Planning Commission that's also available on YouTube. Then we ask that you direct your questions to the chat so that we may direct them and pose them to our panelists. So if you give me a moment, I'm going to share my screen to share with you the video presented by the Zoning Commission, the Planning Commission, to better understand zoning. And we're going to share.
Welcome to Introduction to Zoning, part of the.
This is the beauty of Zoom meetings. I'm going to share my screen and we are going to get to that immediately. And here we go. So enjoy the video, take notes, prepare your questions. We look forward to the discussion after this short video.
The Philadelphia City Planning Commission's Learning Series. In this video, you will learn what zoning is, how it evolved over time, what purposes it serves, what kinds of things zoning regulates, and how you can make decisions. If you have ever been involved in development, either as a developer, a neighbor, or as an interested community member, you may have heard that development needs zoning approval. In this module, we'll explore what that approval is and why we have zoning. Let's return to our 3 developers. Pamela has bought an empty lot and wants to build a new house. Nadia, Pamela's neighbor, wants to renovate her house, and Maurice, Nadia's brother, owns a corner building where he wants to open a smoothie shop. Each of our 3 developers will need a zoning permit to move ahead with their projects. So let's get to our first question. What is zoning? To start to answer this question, we'll begin with the word itself, zoning. It's called zoning because zoning rules typically divide a city into zones. Each zone has different rules that make the most sense for that location. Zoning rules are laws. They're approved by the city's legislative body. Here in Philadelphia, City Council adopts zoning legislation. Zoning laws can encompass a huge variety of very detailed rules, but at their core, zoning's essential role is to place reasonable limits on property rights so that residents and businesses can have clear expectations about how properties near them will be used now and in the future. Zoning rules help cities function and reduce conflict between neighbors. But wait, isn't private property private? Can't each individual owner do as they please with their land? Well, it's not quite that simple. Under the US system of property law, owners of property have what's called a bundle of rights. The bundle can be separated and the individual rights can be sold or limited by the government. These rights include access, sale, habitation, construction, producing or selling goods, and many others. So another way to think about zoning would be to consider it a system for defining which of these rights are compatible with the public good in any given location. To understand today's zoning rules, we should look at their origins in the early 1900s. Zoning began as a response by local governments to the unprecedented rapid growth of American cities brought on by industrialization and migration. Zoning evolved in a piecemeal fashion around the country, driven at different times and different places to achieve different goals. Prominent goals evident in early zoning codes were separation of residences from the odors, noise, dust, and pollution of industry, and setting maximum densities in an effort to prevent cramped and potentially unsanitary housing conditions. Some early zoning codes enforced racial segregation by limiting neighborhoods to whites only. These codes were racist and discriminatory reactions to the Great Migration of African Americans fleeing oppression and seeking better opportunities in northern industrial cities. Now, by 1917, racial zoning had been declared unconstitutional in a Supreme Court decision, but private race restrictions, which were written into deeds by developers, remained common throughout the 1950s. Public and private race restrictions had a huge and lasting impact on settlement and development patterns in US cities, even in cities without open segregation laws. Over many decades, zoning rules have evolved. While zoning codes may cover hundreds of topics and include many specific details, most codes today have three basic functions. The first and most essential function of zoning in today's world is to protect health and safety by preventing the overcrowding and exposure to pollutants experienced in American cities in the early 1900s. A second basic function is to set expectations about what can happen on private property. For example, a residential zoning usually prevents property owners from starting businesses that would create smoke, dust, or noise. Rules like this reassure residents and owners that their property will not be affected negatively by changes to their neighbor's property. And contrary to racist zoning goals of the early 20th century, zoning can also be a tool for residents and their elected leaders to work towards important goals, such as providing housing and finding locations for new parks and other public resources. Ideally, these goals are included in a comprehensive plan, which lays out a vision for the future. Zoning rules are one way that cities can realize that vision. They can be used to support justice, equity, and opportunity. Let's talk about the nuts and bolts of zoning. What exactly does zoning regulate? Zoning rules cover a wide variety of topics, but most zoning rules basically govern use and bulk. Use rules set limits on how a property can be used, such as for homes, stores, and factories. Bulk rules deal with the size and shape of buildings and where they can be placed on the lot. Uses are categorized by their function. One example of a use is a house. Some uses produce side effects that might go unnoticed in an industrial setting or would be unpleasant to actually live near. Zoning regulates use so that incompatible uses don't end up right next to each other. Zoning also regulates bulk, or the size and shape of buildings. For example, zoning sets limits on how tall and how close together buildings are allowed to be. Bulk rules prevent overcrowding, maintain access to light and air, and encourage development that harmonizes with what's already there. While zoning rules are powerful, there are a couple of caveats. The biggest one, zoning rules only apply to new buildings and big changes to existing ones. While zoning can reflect a vision of how land will develop in the future, it can't be used to force the closure of pre-existing uses or otherwise deprive a property owner of their right to keep using a property just as they always have. Another important caveat is that zoning doesn't regulate everything about buildings. For example, building codes regulate construction details and energy efficiency. Zoning is too blunt to regulate aesthetic choices or problems like litter, crime, and vacancy. Zoning doesn't control whether homes are rented out, how well properties are maintained, or other aspects of people's behavior. Zoning rules are made up of two parts. The zoning code, or zoning text, contains the written rules of zoning. The rules include a classification system of zoning districts. Different districts have different rules. The zoning map is a map of the city that shows which zoning districts apply in which areas. To find out which zoning rules apply to a piece of land, you would first check the zoning map to see which districts cover that land. Then, the zoning code can tell you which rules apply in that zoning district. So let's return to our three developers. Each of them has learned a little bit more about zoning. Now they're reconsidering their development ideas. Pamela's house is a single family use. She checks the zoning map and finds that her lot is in a zoning district that allows single family homes. She can file for a zoning permit with her design. Nadia had originally planned a third floor addition with 15-foot high ceilings. She checks the height limits for her zoning district and finds that her third floor would exceed the maximum height. Nadia decides to take a few feet off her design to make it comply. She wants to get her project underway and doesn't mind losing the extra height. Maurice is hoping to open a smoothie shop, but finds out that his building is in a zoning district where that type of business is not permitted. However, he's been working with his neighbors and knows that they support his business idea. Luckily for Maurice, there is a zoning appeal process. He decides to file an appeal. You can learn more about how zoning appeals work in our series of videos on registered community organizations. Are you interested in participating in zoning decisions? Get started by learning what zoning districts cover your neighborhood. Get a copy of the Zoning Quick Guide from the link in the description. Look at the district plan for your part of the city to find out if any changes have been proposed. Watch the City Planning Commission agenda for proposed changes in your area and weigh in at hearings. Your community planner on the Planning Commission staff will be happy and able to help you with all these and more, so feel free to reach out. In this video, you learned about the following: what zoning is, how it evolved, what purposes it serves, what zoning regulates, and how you can participate. Thank you for watching this presentation on zoning in Philadelphia. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you found this useful, and don't forget to check out the other videos in this series.
Well, that was some good information that we need to understand zoning in the city of Philadelphia. We want to welcome our 111 participants tonight to the Queen Village Neighborhood Association monthly meeting, where we are discussing zoning and in particular, ByRight zoning projects. Stop. So here we go. So we're getting back. Excuse me 1 second. I'm hoping it's Lord.
I'm Deborah Borden. I'm with the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission, and I'm an Associate General Counsel. This is our zoning one. How zoning works. We're going to go over the zoning basics. We're going to tell you what an overlay zone and what a site plan is. We're also going to discuss the site plan review process.
Okay. Thank you all for enduring those technical difficulties. As we move on, it is the Queen Village Neighbors Association monthly meeting. Tonight we are addressing zoning and the zoning process, especially how it refers to ByRight projects in the neighborhood. I want to be clear that Queen Village does not stand in the way of development or density. It's understood that landowners, as we saw in the video, deserve some autonomy in what is done with their land and their property, thus the zoning code. It can be a complicated process, as sometimes adjacent parcels can have different zoning classifications. The theme of questions we've been receiving at QV&A are centered around neighbors wanting to know how they can interact with the project or its developers to vet concerns. First and foremost, development requires a license. From the Commissioner DiPietro of License and Inspections, he emailed me today. To be clear, an applicant submits a zoning permit application. It's assigned to an examiner for review. If the proposed use is approved under the zoning code, the permit is issued. Alternatively, if the use does not meet code, a refusal is generated so the applicant may appeal to the ZBA. We're going to start off tonight for some more explanation and understanding. And Ian Litwin from the Planning Commission is here to join us to lay the groundwork for better understanding this process. Ian, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And I want to start off the conversation with the groundwork of what are the numbers in a zoning project that determine when ByRight projects involve the community in a civic design review and what that is.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ian. I'm the community manager for City Ethics Commission. The civic design process and advice process. ByRight projects and all development process receiving zoning can be assigned as design review and design review in both for the zoning. Two cases involve numbers. So the case is any building that is greater than 100,000 square feet of new floor area or more than 100 dwellings. The second case is if
Ian,
yes.
Yeah.
You're old. We can't hear you.
We hear you, but it's garbled. So I don't know if it may need a refresh or
Let me try to log out and come back in.
now you
That
are.
actually sounds good.
Yeah, that does.
I don't know what I did.
Oh,
Do it. I'll go start over. So can you hear me?
we do, but it's still just a little, it's just your video is clear, but your voice is a little garbled and you have some really valuable information. So I want to make sure that we hear from you. So if it takes a refresh.
Better now? Is it better now?
Much better. Thank you.
Okay, I took my headphones out. Okay. You might hear my son, but okay, no headphones. So there's two different triggers for civic design review. The first is a project that is greater than 100,000 square feet of new floor area or more than 100 units, and those can be anywhere. The second case is for projects that are adjacent to residential zoning, which would be most of Queen Village, and that is 50,000 square feet or more than 50 units. And then when a project goes to civic design review, they get feedback from the civic design review members, which includes the RCO, and that they can either be asked to come back again, responding to the feedback, or the process is complete and that letter is then sent to L&I. But it's worth knowing that the process is advisory, and that's the way the zoning code was written. So in order for that to change, it would need legislation.
So to be clear, there is the specification about when a civic design review, because a ByRight is self-explanatory. It means the ability to build as the zoning for your parcel allows. And the only time that involvement outside of that quasi-automated process is, can you specify the numbers again?
Yeah, so there's two triggers for civic design review. The first one is any project that's greater than 100,000 square feet of new building or more than 100 units. And the second is specifically for projects adjacent to residential zoning, which is
probably most of Queen Village. And that's 50,000 square feet of new building or more than 50 units, regardless of whether the project needs a variance or not. It's all the same.
And we will definitely get into it more, but to be clear, the civic design review is advisory. And
Yes.
And as I said, we'll get into that more. I just wanted to clarify that. But before we get into that, Queen Village has had a zoning overlay and also a neighborhood conservation overlay. How do these two overlays affect the process, be it any type of zoning, by right, variant, whatnot?
I think what you're referring to are one and the same. So in the old zoning code pre-2012, it was probably just the Queen Village overlay. Now it's one of many neighborhood conservation overlays. And these go into effect at building permit stage, and it affects projects whether or not they need a zoning variance. And the Planning Commission has to approve certain design elements of projects, but these happen after zoning. So this would be when a developer applies for their building permit. L&I would refer those projects to the Planning Commission. It includes things such as window size, heights, materials, things like that. But they're done at building permit stage. It's also worth knowing that 419 Bainbridge is not within the overlay, so that project will not be reviewed.
And thank you for outlining that, because we did have a question that I should refer to about the five density projects coming to Queen Village, 4 of which are by right. The 5 are the formerly Downey's property at Front and South has been approved by the ZBA to be built. There is also, as Ian referred to, 419 Bainbridge, which is the easy parking lot at Passyunk and Bainbridge, and that is a ByRight project. Thirdly, there is a project that's set for demolition, and that would be the strip mall at 2nd and Christian Street. In the neighborhood, you'll know that 7-Eleven has already vacated, as well as 300 Christian, which has been a lot next to the townhomes that were built. They did come to Queen Village back in 2018 for a variance that involved parking, but now they are moving forward with a ByRight plan. So I believe that is 200 and 300 Christian, 419, the parking lot at Passyunk and Bainbridge, Downey's, which got their variance approved by the ZBA, and the 4th, which I knew like the back of my hand, but is 300 on the it's 1015 South 3rd Street, just before Washington Avenue. That is presently under construction. So Ian, I thank you for that. So all those overlays are considered in the whole process prior to it getting to these stages. When a project, as you said, most likely the 50,000 square feet or 50 units triggers a civic design review or a CDR, then what factors come up for consideration in the primarily advisory process of a civic design review?
Yeah, so of those cases, 419 Bainbridge still has to go to CDR. A previous version of it went to CDR. And then 129, 1015 South 3rd came to CDR and actually was asked to return to CDR a second time. So civic design review reviews a number of things. So in the zoning code, it sets out 8 criteria. It's whether the design, including but not limited to the streetscape, curbside management, internal parking circulation, and vehicular and pedestrian access points contribute to the walkability of adjacent streets. Whether the ground level design of the proposal contributes to street activity on adjacent streets. Whether the design of open space within the boundaries of the proposal are appropriate for their intended function and reinforce the importance, safety, and enjoyment of public use of those spaces. Whether the design allows adequate light and air for nearby public streets, sidewalks, trails, parks, open spaces, or adjacent properties. whether the design reinforces and protects the desirable characteristics of the surrounding neighborhood through gradual transition in bulk and scale, whether the design is consistent with the intended character of streets, sidewalks, trails, parks, and open spaces as indicated in the comprehensive plan, and lastly, whether the design is environmentally sustainable.
So basically the civic design review, if we had to summarize it, is the walkability, livability, traffic, greening,
it's basically a public realm review. So we don't talk about the layout of units or, you know, architectural features. It's about the public realm, specifically, you know, the sidewalks, the public spaces, things like that.
Excellent, excellent. So that again goes to like materials, lighting, traffic, greening. Those are things that can be discussed and considered at a CDR.
The impact of those things on the public realm. So we're not going to talk about brick color, although sometimes people try to. That, you know, that's not really important to the public realm. If that makes sense.
Absolutely, absolutely. So just for perspective, Queen Village is not the only neighborhood experiencing these big projects. And so I'm just, from your scope and your work with the Planning Commission, what are the trends across the city so people can better understand that it's not a singular focus on this finite area of Queen Village?
Yeah, so a combination of the growth of the city and then the changes to the tax abatement have led to a surge in applications for building permits. And most of those are going to construction. And it seems like it's affecting more and more areas of the city. So it's not just Center City anymore. It's everything. Specifically, sort of all the neighborhoods along the L and then any neighborhood adjacent to Center City. So you're not alone. And we're seeing development in places we haven't seen development in a very long time. So you're not the only neighborhood undergoing this. And I would say you have more zoning protections than most neighborhoods because of the overlay. But, you know, a developer will find ways to develop anywhere there's value. So your neighborhood is very valuable.
Excellent. Well, I thank you very much. And I want to get to Rich Montanez from the Streets Department as well as Councilman Squilla. But Ian, I will let you think on some things that I'm seeing in the chat before we come back to you. And that has to deal with enforcement brought up by Mike McPhilmy, as well as Greg Damas, who asked what happens when the owner doesn't apply for permits and what happens to the overlay, who enforces it. So the enforcement issue is coming up. And I understand your position, but if you could think about some responses to that, greatly appreciated. We will come back to you. And I'm going to move it along now to Rich Montanez from the Deputy Commissioner from the Streets Department. Rich, thank you so much for joining us tonight. You came in at the last minute, as always, very appreciated. It's good to see you again.
No problem. Sorry, I kept asking me. I had to change my password just before I logged in, so it took me a while.
We're very happy you made it. I think first and foremost, again, is these ByRight projects can be overwhelming because it seems like a green light to do whatever. And I think it's important for the public to understand that there's certain criteria, certain thresholds that a developer has to hit. One of them is making it through the Streets Department before L&I will issue a license to build, if I'm correct. And my question to you is, what aspects of a given project does Streets consider before signing off?
So just like Ian, we have to, in the Planning Commission, we have to follow the laws that are in front of us. For example, people complain and we're have developments coming in with 120, 130 units. Well, the Philadelphia Building Code stipulates that you only need to provide 3 parking spaces for every 10 units, as long as you provide bicycle parking and amenities to public transportation. So one of the things that they complain to the Streets Department all the time is there is not enough parking in our neighborhood. Now, I can't change the building code. I just have to follow what's in the current code. So unfortunately, that is the answer I give everybody. And, you know, people from South Philly, people from Fishtown, Queen Village, Ian and I hear it. Like, you know, these people are going to drive. And unfortunately, I can only enforce the rules and regulations. And like, as Ian mentioned, the developers all know this, and they have lawyers who actually point it out to us, and they take advantage of every possible opportunity they can to maximize their profit. We do ask them, the streets department gets a preliminary review in the zoning, prior to zoning, where we look at the curve cuts, look at the accessibility to their sites. Now with the mixed use residentials, where you have commercial in the first floor, a lot of these are becoming supermarkets. We try to work with them early on about how you're planning your truck traffic, your deliveries, things like that. But they don't come into streets till after zoning has been, after they've gone through zoning. So we tend to review them at that point. Any development that touches or is adjacent to a state road by the HOP process of the state requires either a traffic impact assessment, a TIA, or a traffic impact study. And the streets department will not sign off until the HOP from the state is obtained and all the requirements that the state needs are put out there. So a lot of people and we get calls like, can you bypass the state process? No, we cannot. The city of Philadelphia, the only way we got that we can hold a developer accountable and to be able to meet the state, because the state does not have to sign off on the L&I process, is for streets to hold that line. So we tend to hold the line until we get our studies. Those studies tell us that, you know, what are you going to do for the complete streets? So they have to submit a complete streets checklist, the condition of sidewalks and things like that to us. The complete streets, and we're in the process of trying, is just a checklist they have to submit to the streets department. That complete streets checklist does not hold them accountable to do anything. It is suggested that they do the things, but the way the law is currently written, there's a loophole. They do not have to do complete streets. Now, there are other factors that come in here, such as PWD with stormwater management. And I know a little about it. I don't know how much Ian knows about the stormwater management and stormwater retention and green infrastructure that the developers all have to provide. But that also comes in. So if the water department tells them you need to put this in the public right away in order to do your stormwater management, the streets department, in essence, has to accommodate them because it is the city telling you to do it. So a lot of times, those are some of the things we're kind of balancing on our side, and also trying to make it a more walkable, friendlier city for both pedestrians and bicyclists.
Rich, there's a lot of good information there. I just want to reiterate. First of two, one is streets weighs in after zoning, which what after L&I issues a license, especially particularly like the ByRight projects.
So we get a preliminary review as part of the zoning board. So we get to see it as part of that preliminary review. Within zoning, the only thing streets department is allowed to review would be the curve cuts. The curve, if a project is putting in new curve cuts or additional curve cuts. If you have existing curve cuts and you're just going to utilize your existing curve cuts, they're already permitted. They're allowed by the city. Now, that becomes a little troublesome because some developers, and Eleanor, the one I'm dealing with, and actually Mark's district, it's 9th and Washington. They already have an existing curve cut. They're actually now going mixed use residential, where they're planning to put 115 parking spaces. So the streets department cannot tell you no because your curve cuts already exist. There's also, that leaves a little loophole. The streets department is only by law allowed to comment on surface lots. Garage, when the law got written for the streets department to look at it, garages were not done. So therefore, there are all these laws that we're trying to bring up to date in our book. So, but those are the things like that's one of the loopholes the developers find. But if you already have a curb cut, in essence, you're not coming back to streets to say, please permit this because it's been there. Some of them have been there for hundreds of years.
And we have run into that definitely where the curb cut exists, but because it was unused for so long, it became an almost invisible curb cut.
Yeah.
And when you actually go back to the code and what is and is not allowed, the curb cut did exist. So I completely understand that. That has definitely happened before. Just if you could reiterate what exactly triggers and what triggers a traffic study or an impact assessment. And again, if you could reiterate if that is advisory or binding.
So if traffic impact studies binding, so for example, the reason why the state gets involved is because they have to issue HOPs. Those HOPs are legal documents. So, and whenever you're building adjacent to or near a state road and you're impacting a state road, the state requires it and the streets department holds to that law. And if in that study says that you must make these mitigations in order to improve the congestion in the area, then you have to do it. The only way you will get the HOP and the HOP is granted to you, it states this is granted with the understanding that the following improvements will be done to the public right away. So it is
HOP again.
Highway Occupancy Permit.
Okay.
It's the state's version of a permit.
But what? Okay, I don't want to confuse things, but for a development project on places that don't involve state highways, what
the streets department does is we meet with the developer, whatever. For example, if the traffic impact study says that it would benefit from a left turn signal, left turn bay, or things like that, then the developer would have to do that as part of their as part of the agreement for the streets department to sign the permit and for them to do the work. And we put that stipulations in the permit. Should they fail to do what we asked them to do and what was agreed upon, the streets department then asks L&I to hold the CO until that work gets done.
Does every big development project require a study?
Every big one, yes. So there are some, for example, like I was saying, 115 units. Yeah, we would require a study from them. But keep in mind, what we see from them is a study based on the building code. So 115 units at three units for every, or 3 parking spaces for every 100, for every 10 units, you're looking at 33, 34 parking spaces.
But outside of parking spaces, as far as traffic flows go, is a study required for how traffic will move around a new dense project?
So what the study looks at is the current volumes around the development. So whatever volumes is already congested, it's how much congestion are they adding to that congestion in essence. So when you look at it, we also look at how much pedestrian volume, how much bicycle volume. Those are all the numbers we ask for from the developer's engineer. So they do an engineering study based on the state guidance, which is what the streets department reviews. If it's obviously, if it's a mixed use where you have a supermarket, you're going to have more, at least the hope for the streets department and the way we're planning is we're hoping more people are walking, grabbing their groceries on an everyday basis rather than driving the block down, parking the car, picking up their groceries and coming back. So And we do look at the volumes, anticipated volumes for pedestrians, anticipated volumes for bicyclists, and anticipated volumes for those who are driving. We also take a look at commercial, is how are your trucks getting in and out? With Giant, we have a good deal with Giant. So the Giant, they come out of Lancaster. Their trucks deliver to 3 stores within the Philadelphia region. And so we work with them, routing them through the neighborhoods. So we know which route they're going to go to. And forgive me, I don't know where every Giant's at, but let's just say they go one in South Philly, one in Fishtown, one in the Northeast. And I'm just using that. We do the same thing with the Wawas. We work with their routing people, their truck people. And that to them is more energy. Remember, the less the trucks in traffic, the more they're going through, or the easier they're going, the less diesel they're using, the more they save, the less pollution, air pollution's in the city of Philadelphia. So we do tend to work with some of these big companies to try to do that. We also try to talk to some of them, and it's been very difficult, but at least with Wawa, we've been very fortunate to try to switch a lot of their deliveries to overnight, like the midnight, 11 to 7 shift. And we prefer that because then the trucks are out of the normal traffic. You're delivering, you're not creating congestion, things like that. So we try to work with things with some of those like that. Others we're not so good at working with, but we continue that communication with them.
Rich, thank you so much. I mean, there's so much valuable information there and even a lot of stuff to unpack. And I do appreciate the effort that Streets takes with planning some of these chains, because I know that that change to deliveries was enacted on the South 2nd Street Wawa here in Queen Village. So we are definitely seeing the positive effects of that proactive action. I'm going to come back to you as well with questions from the chat, but I do want to head over to Councilman Squilla. Councilman Squilla, thank you so much for joining us tonight. As we've heard tonight, there are a lot of factors that go into any development project in the city. But I'm sure that you hear from us, from other RCOs, and from many neighbors about ByRight Projects and what you're going to do. So my question to you is, how do you advise concerns that come to your office about ByRight Projects? And how do you balance concerns from the neighborhood with rules that are specifically outlined in city code and zoning code?
Yes, I mean, what we try to do is when it's a ByRight project, often we don't know about them until they're starting, because they go in to get their permits. They don't need to contact us or contact the RCO. So they already pulled their permits and they already are ready to go, and then we find out about them. I always try to get, if we find out, a developer to work with the community on what those concerns may be for that project. Not that they have to do it, because they don't. They could, just take the track, and we do run into some developers. We did it up on Huntington Street in Port Richmond, where he didn't care. He didn't want to meet with anybody. He was doing what he wanted, whether we spoke to him or not. And he went to CDR. He went there twice, but it didn't matter because he still was going to do it. But most developers will work with them because they want to be good neighbors. At least they want to be neighborly, but they still want to do their development as they see fit, because it's supposedly by right. By right development was something starting in 2011 and 2012, they had a 2035 plan where planning worked with the RCOs and communities to go through a remapping process, so that each community would look at their neighborhood, see what the zoning was, look at what the potential developments could be, and see if these developments fit within the realm of their community. Now, since then, once it was remapped, the community would work with planning. Planning would then work and then submit legislation to us. We would then introduce that in council, and that would remap all the areas to specific zonings, RSA5, CMX3, so forth and so on. But over time, things change, and other communities now have remapped their areas, met with planning again, and said, you know what, some of these areas that are zoned no longer fit how this community wants to grow or build. And now we want to look at remapping, and planning will go through that with you. And it's a long process. It takes several, sometimes a year or so, several months at least, to go through, and they map every parcel within your boundaries and say, all right, this is CMX3. You could see a building of you know, 38 feet or 40 feet, so many units could fit here, and you get an idea of what it would be there with bonuses, because then you have bonuses that people use that sometimes weren't taken into consideration. Bonuses for affordable units, bonuses for a green roof, bonuses for, at one point they were groceries or food deserts, if you put a grocery store in there. And what happened was people were able to add density and add height in there that wasn't perceived when the community first supported the remapping. So it's always good to look at that and work with planning to go into your community and see if all these parcels that we have that could possibly be built, especially in the area that has surface parking lots, because surface parking lots are going away. And a lot of development is happening on them. But what we do, we try to reach out to that developer and say, hey, can you work with the community anyway? We know it's ByRight. Would you be willing to work with them to you know, see what their concerns are, to maybe alter your plan? Now, they don't have to. You still have the ability, if you can, within 30 days to appeal a ByRight project. But I haven't known any appeal, you know, even if it won in zoning board appeal, ever won past that next level, and it would get reverted back because it was a ByRight development. And so the challenge always is, let's be proactive. Instead of being reactive and waiting till somebody builds something and then trying to fight them or try to stop them, how do we be proactive and look and work with planning to look at our neighborhoods again and say, hey, should we remap our areas to understand what can be built, what density can the community like you said earlier, you're not against development, but you don't want development to overwhelm the community or change it from what it is. So where do you take that middle ground? And the best way to do that is to do a remapping. We did it in a couple other neighborhoods, and we did it recently in Society Hill. We're doing it again in Port Richmond, you know, and it's basically the Planning Commission working with the community to see what they could take. And there's give and take in that. Planning will say, no, we should have density here. We shouldn't have density there. Working with you to come up with a compromise that works best for all. So it's a challenge. It takes a lot of time, but there's a lot of input from the community during that process. You know, people go to the meetings, planning puts charts out there. They map every street in your region and your boundaries, and you can see RSA 5 single family home. You know what that could do, right? CMX1, what does that mean? What does CMX3 mean? How many units can you fit in a building like that? So I would always suggest if people see something like this happening, and now you said there's 4 projects that are ByRight that doesn't seem to fit the neighborhood model, then we need to really look at that, go in, meet with planning, and go over a remapping plan for that community.
Excellent. Councilman, so we did Queen Village in 2016.
Oh, 2016. So that's
it was Bill 161112. So you introduced that bill. So
right. We did that with planning and the community, yeah. Right? And once you finish that plan, you send the legislation to me, I introduce it, you know, it's a sign off by the community, but times change, right? Things change. And so what we expected back in maybe 2016 is different in 2022. Also, don't forget, sometimes bonuses are added to the code that weren't in effect when planning did the original mapping. So if we could look at those bonuses and say, all right, this would have worked fine, but now with bonuses, maybe it is too much. I don't know. But that's where planning could help when you're looking to do a remap. I know it's a lot of work for planning, and South Philly has a planning person. And Ian, you know, you were involved in some of meetings with other RCOs, and you know how challenging these meetings are, but at least there's input from everybody, and we get to a consensus point where we introduce something.
It sounds like there's some really good actual avenues for input that may not be readily acknowledged, and that is one, taking advantage of education, right, Ian, with the Planning Commission and how things work. There's the opportunity to weigh in on, as the councilman put out, like a remapping process. And the important thing to remember is that kind of when you walk by something every day and it's been there for a long time, it doesn't click in your mind that it has the potential to be bulldozed and rebuilt. So it is tough to anticipate everything, but it's good to know that there's an opportunity to work with things as times change, because yes, it was 2016, but we're looking back on the world has changed dramatically in 6 years. Philadelphia has changed dramatically in 6 years. So it is good to know that those options are on the table. And Deputy Commissioner, Councilman, before I come back to you with more questions, I'm going to go back to Ian with the questions that I posed to you before. Other conversation about enforcement. And that was about what, if any, enforcement can the Planning Commission can enact, and what happens when permits aren't applied for and things happen that shouldn't be. How is that enforced? Or
so L&I enforces. So L&I enforces both building and zoning permits, and they would also enforce work without a permit as well.
Well, then, and following up on that, what incentives, Benjamin Novak asks, what incentives are there for developers to take CDR input into account and make changes that might reduce the impact or their profits?
So we've seen mixed results from developers at CDR. There's a lot of developers who engage in the process because they know it's going to improve their project and also, you know, relationships with the neighborhood. And then we have some developers, some architecture teams who kind of, you know, just check off the box, you know, it's part of the process and that's it. Typically projects that have to go to the zoning board after CDR tend to be more receptive because they know there's another hearing where CDR can be brought up and that could affect the decision of the zoning board, but it can be hit or miss depending on the project and the developer.
So by rights, without that revisiting the zoning board, it is largely a question of choice to factor in the input that they get from a CDR.
Yeah, I would say it depends on later review. So a project that's in your NCO that's going to need to sign off on the design at building permit by the Planning Commission, they usually would listen more. But a project that has a clear path to development, there's no real incentive to make the developer pay attention other than, you know, it's a public meeting. Sometimes the newspaper picks up on it, things like that, but there's no legal mechanism to make them listen because it's an advisory process.
And that means that, Councilman, going back to your point, there is advantage in being proactive with a developer, entering into conversations, having kind of civil discourse rather than this oftentimes the situation where it's a we versus them situation, which doesn't seem to move the needle.
Well, sometimes that happens. You get to that point because some of the developers are they just don't listen. And like Ian said, a lot of the good developers do take that recommendation and make the project a better project. A lot of the input from the community makes the project a better project. So a lot of the good developers will do that and use that. I've seen that even with Durst, who's a big time developer up in River's Edge, up near the Ben Franklin Bridge. And they went and they changed some plans, even though it was by right, by what the community's input was and how it would affect and impact them. So some developers do that, and you try to work with them, but the other developers know that, you know what, you can't stop me. And if you do, we'll win in court. And sometimes delay benefits them anyway, because they're not ready to build at that time, especially now that the abatement change is already in effect. So we want to try to work with them. And my thing is, at least with them, is that they may build another project that may need a variance. So if they are going to build again in the city and they need a variance and they didn't listen to anybody, you're going to give them a hard time. You're going to give them a hard time. We're going to give them a hard time, and we're not going to be easy to work with. So developers that are doing multiple projects will at least try to work with you and try to come up with some. They might not do everything you ask, but they may do some things.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm going to try to make it through some of these questions now. And I don't know that there's a response for this, but Lisa Torrieri asks regarding 5th and Bainbridge, it fails at design review because it doesn't even come close to blending with the neighborhood. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say that as a ByRight project, and please, gentlemen, correct me if I'm wrong, as a ByRight project, who decides what fits in a neighborhood and what doesn't?
So if it meets the requirements of the zoning code at 5th and Bainbridge, there are no real further reviews other than when they apply for building permit, maybe building code, but from a zoning standpoint, like the building height, the envelope, all of that is after CDR, it's automatically approved. So there's no way to say it doesn't meet with the neighborhood because we don't really have a mechanism to do that.
Yes, it does. It does. Subjectivity is hard to legislate. I can understand that. Again, I'm not sure what can be answered, but if it's already been answered, but Pat Panzera asks, are there specific parameters for the components of the CDR review? The criteria sounds mostly subjective, kind of design in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah, so it is mostly subjective, and this is probably why it's an advisory process, but we try to focus on the public realm and not like specific architecture, more of how the building interacts with the surroundings and mostly, the ground floor of the building. So we try to keep it away from, subjective things and keep it about the public realm.
Thank you. And Councilman, this might be for you. Dick Feldman asks, what are the changes in the tax abatements?
Starting January 1st, the tax abatement is no longer a 10-year tax abatement for residential developments. It is a phased out process where it goes from 100% the first year down to 0 to 10th year. So it's 90% year 2, 80% abatement year 3, 70%, so forth, all the way down to 0 on year 10. So it's a phase out. So basically it becomes a 5-year abatement. And that's why you saw such a big push. Now, I understand some of these other projects, at least 5th and Bainbridge, is not going to be under the old abatement. If they get approved for an abatement, it would be under the phased out abatement. So that's the difference in what the abatement was and what it is starting January 1st this year.
Excellent, thank you. And again, Lisa Torrieri has a follow-up question, and that is, I believe for you, Rich Montanez, 5th and Bainbridge, has there been a traffic study?
I would need to look at all like the council. I mean, the last 3 months of 2021, we had over 2,500 developers come in. So I can't, off the top of my head, I can't even, if they submit it, I will have to look.
That's an impressive number. We will follow up on you to find out about that so we can get that answer across. I don't know that anyone's prepared if this is even the right time, but what's the final design for South 3rd project? This Jocelyn Ross, I believe South 3rd went through its 2 CDRs and they were cleared to move ahead, even though she says it looks like every new building is taller than what is already there. Why and how has that been allowed? And I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that was the zoning permissible on that parcel for that kind of building. And because we're not accessing every specific parcel during this meeting, if we need to follow up, I'm sorry, Joellen, we definitely will. Neelish Seth asks, is there a traffic impact assessment on non-state road projects? And she's specifically asking around the project that's coming to 2nd and Christian.
I would have to look to see if we requested one. If it triggers, if it has a brand new parking lot with so many spots, it would trigger Regulation X, which is Health Department regulation, and then they would have to, yes, provide a traffic impact study. So without me being familiar with that particular one, I will have to get back to you, Eleanor.
Thank you. Thank you. This is interesting, and this might be for you, Ian. Are commercial projects required to meet historical requirements?
Only if the project is on a lot or a building that's on the local historic register. Otherwise, the Historic Commission has no purview. The Historic Commission does get to approve design though. So if a project is on the register, there's a lot more control over what can be done. If it's a national historic district, we do not have any purview over those.
Okay, thank you, thank you. I'm checking out more questions. I'm going to see if we've got someone new to take a question from. And Terry Domsey asks, would the streets department and the council member be available to meet with neighbors who live near 2nd and Christian? We are concerned about the impact on the small streets that adjoin the location. And I will go so far as Terry to tell you that we'll definitely we'll be happy to take your comments, gentlemen, and QV&A will be happy to facilitate any discussion there. But I'll let you both comment. I'm
happy to meet. Yeah, set it, give us a time and date or Zoom or whatever it is. Happy to meet and discuss it. We probably try to get the developer there too, if those concerns are about how it impacts the surrounding streets.
Thank you. I'm reading. What should there be? Again from Joellen. Why not require by law developers' cooperation? This is actually a good question because this goes back to the idea of
it is by law.
Allowable autonomy. And her question is, right, why not require by law developers' cooperation? Why should they be allowed to do whatever they want without regard to the community? Now that's a bit skewed because
right,
it's not what they want. They're meeting zoning requirements.
They're meeting the requirements that were put into the code. So they can't do whatever they want. They could do what's allowed. So they're only doing what they're allowed to do depending on the code. If we don't think that the code fits our neighborhood, then we should change it. And then that's the way to make people come to the community, because they would need a variance if they were going to do something that didn't fit that specific code. And we need to work with the community and planning on that, I think, if that's the direction that you want to go. But if you have an RSA property, a single family home, and you could build, I think, Ian, correct me, but 38 feet by right, and somebody builds up to 38 feet, they could do that by right. That's in the code. If they try to build 40 feet, now they can't, it's not within the code, then you then have a say over that matter. But there was a big push in 2011 and during the 2035 remapping is to get people to not get variances, try to build by right. And that's what the remapping was for. And that's why they met with the community, and the community supported the zonings. And then we introduced that through council with the community support, because what can the community handle? But a lot of things changed since then. So it is time, I think, that we should reevaluate that and look at that and see if changes should be made again. I know Ian's probably cringing because it's a lot of work on planning, but it's important, I think, to relook at this. The city's changing, everybody's, ideas are changing of how development is, and you'll see how it works. And the only problem with that, when you go changing, a lot of people have different ideas. Some people, we go to meetings, not enough parking. Some people said it's too much parking. Some people say we want more density. Some people say it's too much density. It's a constant conflict. So you got to be careful when you do remapping. Some of the louder people may say, yeah, this should be more dense here. You should have more development here. And so your community would support that. But we will support at the end of the day with planning and the community group once, and we will introduce that as planning would write the legislation.
It's worth noting that the zoning board is not the answer to all your problems, as they usually approve 85% or more of variances. So that's not always the answer either.
No, but 85%, if you think about it, most of the projects that go through a variance process are supported by the community as they go through, right? The variance, like it might be a person who's doing something in their backyard and they don't have enough open space. And so the community says, yeah, we support that. So it sounds like it's a lot, but I know, at least in our instance, the RCOs have challenges with certain ones and you fight them, but other ones, a majority of them are just supported. So it's not, I don't think there is still a possibility to win. And then at least you have a legal recourse, even with an appeal. But without that, you have nothing and everybody builds what they want.
And that's an important point that appetites for zoning change, as well as leadership in civic organizations, correct? So it behooves everybody to get involved in the meetings that they can and understand more about the process, so more informed debate and decisions can be had around this if it's going to decide where a neighborhood is going for approximately, like now, the next 6 years. So that is yet another way that the community can get involved. There is another good question from Mike McPhilmy here, and we I'm sure many RCOs have dealt with this across the city, is when a project comes through, specifically a residential one, and gets passed through zoning, what is the recourse for violations that have been found by the zoning board that have been found, and how does the enforcement occur? So with any violations, with any lack of adherence to plans or any violations, the follow-up is?
You mean if they don't build according to the plans they submitted to the city and approved? We don't issue a CO.
How about if one's been issued, but, you're talking, that's what they need after.
You need a certificate of occupancy to occupy the building. There are buildings in the city of Philadelphia that are occupied without COs. It does becomes a little difficult. Some of these are single family homes where the developer has unfortunately sold it to an individual who now has no legal right to be there because there's no certificate of occupancy. And now it's a little difficult sometimes to do the eviction. So the city's trying to go through court to get the developer. So those, if you're talking about something like that, we're trying to do everything, and it's the courts are very slow lately.
Dealing with a backlog, no doubt, from the continuing pandemic. Jacqueline Dwyer asks about the project on South and Front Street, Downey's, and to answer you, Jacqueline, yes, it is moving forward. And they while there was a non-support from Society Hill and Queen Village, the ZBA did approve it. The project is moving forward. Greg Damas asks, when enforcement is I guess it's L&I enforcement is lax. When L&I does not enforce building code, who can residents turn to?
You want to take that one, Mark?
L&I is the be-all to end-all of enforcement on these models. If they don't enforce it, I mean, we could bring the attention to the media. We could, do something else. But, a lot of times too, it's L&I does things. And then if the person is in violation, they go back out again. They have a long process. If they're in violation, they go back another 30 days. They give them 30 days to comply. And then if they don't comply, they could take them to court. And then what they also could do in the meantime is that person could apply for a variance or could apply for something that also gives them more time to comply. So depending on what part of that aspect you're in, Our only recourse, though, is to work with L&I and keep following up with them. We have cases that are in court. Sometimes it took a year or two to get to court. Then the law department takes over at that point. And so, you know, these are challenges, and they're very frustrating, especially when you have a blatant person who's blatantly just doing it, and you know they're carrying you along just to keep doing what they want illegally. But, you know, L&I has certain procedures they have to follow too. And if they're not following them, we could call them to their attention, you know, maybe get the L&I commissioner to look into it. But it is a long process with some of these compliance issues that we see. And L&I too is, you know, staff-wise is also challenged, but that's no excuse. You know, we still got to make sure people are following the rules and regulations. There are consequences, but there's also a time lag in between. It's very frustrating for us in my office, but also frustrating for the neighbors who are complaining about it.
Exactly, and I've seen quite a few questions that aren't exactly on topic, so I don't want to veer too much from it. I'm looking to see if there are any new comments from anybody else as I try to sum up the fact that this is in constant motion, and while set could be amended when we're referring to the zoning code, it's really important for neighbors to weigh in, to get involved, to go to the meetings, to educate themselves about the zoning process. Ultimately, there is room for conversation with developers. It's a ByRight project at 5th and Bainbridge. We are specifically talking to the developers there about consideration of aspects that are important to the community. And there's absolutely no binding requirement through the ByRight zoning code. But it goes to show that some conversation and some good discourse might be able to move the needle a little bit. Ultimately, can I ask you, Rich Montanez, is there anything you would like to leave the public with as far as streets and traffic and what considerations are specifically for these ByRight projects?
I mean, Streets Department tries to work with the developer as much as possible. We also try to take in consideration what impact this is going to be. The mayor does have a Vision Zero policy, and the council member can tell you, I think he has probably about 40 or 50 blocks that he would like speed cushions in. We are trying to get to all of them. There's a heck of a backlog on speed cushions in the city of Philadelphia. This has also been complicated with us trying to find the magic bullet that's going to stop the dirt bikes. So it's quite a task. And it's very challenging. I mean, as we try to work with these developers to provide safer streets out there for all the users, brighter streets, more calmer streets that accommodate pedestrians, bicyclists, and commerce and cars. So, you know, and the challenging part here is streets are 26 feet wide in your area. And that's not a lot of public space for everybody to use. And everybody wants to be number one. And therefore, I always say Streets Department's the bad guy, because nobody can be if everybody's number one, nobody's number one. And so it's very difficult. And it's a very difficult challenge to balance this. I mean, to put in, you know, we're putting in some areas protected bike lanes, but that's because we have the right of way. We have the area where we can do, we have the advantages to do this. And, you know, trying to balance the needs of the neighborhoods with what we feel the needs of Philadelphia will be in the next 20, 30 years, as the council member says. I mean, Ian, correct me if I'm wrong, Ian, 2040 planning was the one that just came out, or 2035? I can never keep track of this.
2035 was completed a few years ago. We're in the process of developing a public engagement strategy for the next version of whatever that is. But we're not, a lot has changed in the past 2 years. So
yeah,
the next plan might look a lot different.
Well,
yeah,
go ahead.
I do. I mean, I think the one thing has, and as a guy who's always been coming into Center City during this pandemic, where it's, I think things are completely changing in our view. I mean, more people are telecommuting now. The volumes we're seeing in the city streets are still not to, they're like 90% of pre-pandemic volumes, but we offset that with the fact that you're only, SEPTA, I believe, is running at around 38%.
Mm-hmm.
So although we're seeing vehicular traffic at a certain level, the transit ridership is not getting to that level. So we don't know whether people are just coming into work and they're driving, or, which is kind of scary to us because the roads can only handle so much volume, or what's happening to the people coming in, and the footprint of our businesses has been minimized in Center City and in all the other areas where, people now choose to work from home. So I think I think we're going to be in this limbo where I don't know what to do for the next couple of years until something stabilizes, based on the COVID pandemic that we just had. And who knows what's going to look like 10 years from now. I think telecommuting, it's probably here to stay forever. And as a personal thing, and and the council member can say, when I'm interviewing kids in college, that's the first question I'm being asked. How many days can I work from home? I'm like, you do realize you work for the government, right?
That's you actually hit the nail on the head, that we are very much collectively in a very transitional phase, and being able to predict exactly where that's going to stabilize is incredibly hard. But I want to thank you very much, Deputy Commissioner Montanez, for making yourself available and opening up the door to understand that there's input, there's engagement. These things are possible, not necessarily needing to be adversarial, but exploring what options there are and what conversations can be had. And I really appreciate you joining us and explaining some of those tonight. And Ian, as we round things up, you said 2035 is finished, that exploratory input by the Planning Commission and what people want to see the city of Philadelphia be like in 2035. What other options are there for either education or engagement with the Planning Commission?
So we, because of the pandemic, all of our meetings are being held remote. So we have a monthly Planning Commission meeting, civic design review, which is usually monthly, but last year often happened twice a month just because of the amount of projects. We also have the Historical Commission. These are all online. We have the Citizens Planning Institute, which is our education and outreach arm. That's a process you have to apply to. And then it's a series of classes that teach you about the development process, how legislation works, real estate, things of that nature. And then we have the video we saw earlier is one in a series. There's 5 videos. Sorry, can you hear me?
Now we can, yes.
Okay, sorry. My internet's been bit. So there's a series of 5 of those videos. We are very short-staffed just because of the pandemic. A lot of positions can't be backfilled currently. So I am the community planner for everything from Girard Avenue all the way to Washington Avenue. That's a lot of people in a lot of neighborhoods. But I'll put my email in the chat.
And if you could also include just a link for the citizens, I don't want to misname it. The Citizens Planning
Institute.
The Citizens Planning Institute. Is that free?
There's a very small fee, and there's also scholarships. It's like
and also, I would like to go out on a limb and say that anyone from Queen Village, if you're interested in participating in that, and there's any apprehension about covering that cost, please come and see us. We would like to know. We would like to get as many people involved, engaged, educated to see where, as Rich put it, where we're going to end up in the next, couple of years, where that stabilizing factor is going to take place. So Ian, thank you so much for making the time and talking to us tonight. There was a lot of good information, and I can't promise you that I won't be calling to have you back again sometime in the future.
That's fine.
It's really, really informational. Thank you so much. And Councilman Squilla, I want to thank you for always making yourself available, helping us to advocate, understand, and navigate what is possible, what is not possible. There's a lot of information. There are a lot of possibilities. We're not going to shoulder Ian tonight with the possibility of a zoning remapping for Queen Village, but it's good to know that that information is out there and it's accessible.
Well, I want to thank Ian too, and Richie Montanez for jumping on, because they have long days, and it's great to see them at a community meeting. And they're going above and beyond to help us. So I appreciate that, because that input is so important to hear from the experts in the city. So, but thank you for your continued, work with the community. And listen, there's going to be challenges, as we move forward. And I think by working together, we'll be able to get through them.
Absolutely. And so again, gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for participating. To echo Councilman Squilla, all three of you have very busy, long days, and we appreciate the extra added time to engage with the communities. It's very, very appreciated. I want to thank all our attendees where we topped out at about 110 tonight. So that's pretty good turnout, pretty good interest in what's happening in our neighborhood and beyond. And thank you very much to everybody. We'll see you next month when we are talking, I believe Act 81, the liquor law changes. We'll get information out to you about that. Until then, thank you very much, everybody. Have a safe evening. Good night.
Thank you all. Take care.